Hello and welcome to Your City. I'm your host, Lynn Turner Fitzgerald. Joining me today is Anna Vickers. She is the manager with the planning department for the city of Billings. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
having me.
There's been a lot of legislative action regarding land use, and then it comes down to our level. And basically what I'm trying to find out today, and you can share with us, is really how it's going to impact people in Billings and other Montana communities. But I want to talk about your location first. Now, we did tour the new City Hall, parts of it, a few months ago, and it's beautiful. But you're not there yet.
Correct. Correct. They're still going through the process of getting everything completed.
Right.
There's some historic tax credits that are involved in that. For the time being, our planning staff can be located at the depot, which is at 2224 Montana Avenue.
Okay.
We share that space with Public Works, which has actually been really beneficial for working between the departments. So
Oh, really?
our entire staff is not actually in the building. There's just not enough room. But every day we have a planner one on duty, our planning clerk on duty, and a senior planner that is on duty. And it rotates throughout the week. Our staff does come in for meetings, as necessary or requested. We're happy to come in and meet with the public. But for right now, just due to the lack of space, we just have a couple of people in there every day.
Where's the rest of the department?
We're all working remote, which
Oh.
has been a source of some frustration for the staff because I think they want to get back in there and be a team. So we do try to meet up once every 2 weeks
Okay.
and have a team meeting as well. And we do a lot of phone calls and use a lot of Teams or Zoom meeting calls to talk to each other. But for public interfaces at this point, there's just a couple of us that are at the depot every single day.
Well, so if a member of the public wanted to come in and talk, face to face with someone, would it be a good idea to call it in advance?
No, they can come in any
Okay.
single day, and there will always be someone there to talk to them.
Okay.
We will always have at least our Planner One team there to talk to them, and that's generally the people that can answer any questions about zoning, fence permits, sign permits. They review master site plans. Some of them, depending on which staff member you're talking to, reviews subdivision applications or zoning applications. And then if there's anything that's out of the wheelhouse of that Planner One, they can get the senior planner that's on
Okay.
duty to also help and talk to them. But if there was a specific topic that you wanted to discuss, let's just say that you were interested in redeveloping a piece of property and you wanted to have a couple of people there, we will come in and meet with you
Oh, nice.
on an appointment as well. But
Okay.
day-to-day questions or submittals of applications, you are more than welcome to stop by anytime, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We will be there.
Let us know when you move.
Yes, we're very excited about it.
I want to know a little bit about your background. What got you interested in planning?
It's an interesting story. I'm actually, so I grew up in South Louisiana. I
thought I heard a slight little accent there.
Yeah.
You've done very well, though. It's mostly gone.
Thank you. So I studied political science and history and was going to go into law school and had actually been accepted into law school in the South. I discovered the love of Montana on a road trip over 10 years ago, and I moved over to the Missoula area where they have the U of M Law School. I got a job working at an engineering firm in the private sector and just kind of really enjoyed the planning, and they noticed that I had a propensity to understand laws, pulled me into planning, and I've just been doing it ever since. And I worked for, almost 8 or 9 years over in Missoula, and then took a job promotion in the private sector to Billings that required a relocation. And I've been in Billings for the last year and a half now.
And you're fairly new now to the city of Billings, right?
That's correct.
The organization of the city of Billings.
That's correct. I started this job in June.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the 2023 legislative session, there were a number of bills passed that will impact zoning and planning in some but not all communities. Do I understand that right? Is there a population threshold?
There's a population threshold. Typically it's 70,000 people or 5,000 people. It depends on like the way that the wording was specifically, but it applies to municipalities in a lot of cases.
Okay.
There are a few of them that do apply to both county and city, but the major ones, which I'm sure you're gonna want to discuss, is the Montana Land Use Act, and that is directly related to cities. Counties do have the opportunity to opt into it, but at this point, we are working specifically on the city of Billings for the community.
Okay. Now, why would the county have the option not to go by these regulations?
The way the legislation was written, it just provides the option to opt into it.
Okay.
I think a lot of concern that we've heard from different counties was that not all of the counties have countywide zoning. And in the future, maybe they'll consider it, but it's not a requirement at this point. And when you see across the state and you look at various different counties, you're often looking at, you can be looking at a very small area that might have one planner or no planner at all.
Okay.
And it's really triggered towards these cities that are having a lot of development and have a lot of need for a plan and some guidance associated with that. And this act is intended to help with that.
And this all stemmed from something of a housing crisis in Montana. Affordable housing is really hard to come by.
Correct.
So this legislation then is designed to combat that, right?
Correct.
Okay. In what way?
The intent of the legislation is to provide a community input point and plan for where you would see housing, future businesses, redevelopment, industry, and put those guides on a map with the community's input and have a vision for what we want to see and have planned growth that is strategic and not a surprise to people. So what is going to be required and what we'll be calling on from the community is a lot of public input.
Okay.
Because it's very valuable to this plan. This is their opportunity to comment and specific to their neighborhood, specific to anywhere in the city, and let us know what their concerns are, where they would like to see these things happen. And that should be incorporated into this Montana land use plan, and it will be specific to the city of Billings and our annexation area. But what that does, once the plan is configured, is it changes the process to where the subdivision and zoning applications will go as well, which is intended to speed up that process. Because you have a plan that's already been reviewed for a lot of impacts on the environment, agriculture facilities, and etc. Public safety, sorry, that's an important one. And this plan should reflect that and consider that whenever we're mapping out these strategic places for future development. Once that's done on the front end with where we're going to go with those land designations or those future developments, it then provides surety and guidance to the developer for that future growth. And it really speeds up their process because it says, like, here's what's allowable here, here's what you could do at the highest potential of this land, and it makes a subdivision review process for, say, a major subdivision go a lot quicker because it's going to just go through an abbreviated review at that point because it would have already been evaluated for all those local impacts and natural environment impacts, etc.
Well, I guess I was mistaken. I thought some of this legislation took control away from community planning boards and communities.
It's intended to put the involvement with the public at the front end.
Okay.
So it will, in the long run, you wouldn't have the comment on everyday items, but you have to comment during this process of making the plan. So right now we have two different plans that are neighborhood plans that are going on right now. There's the West End neighborhood plan and there's the Heights neighborhood plan. And we've had just recently a Heights open house and we've received a lot of comments, 130 or so far. If you haven't done so yet, please go and comment on it because we want to hear what the community wants to see, what their concerns are, etc. And eventually the document will be drafted, and it's going to be for review to the public as well for commentation, and we go through an entire public process. So what this new Montana Land Use Act does is we're accountable to a lot of public participation.
Okay.
And to the point where I've heard from some communities that are a little further along in the process that their public is getting a little burned out from participating so much. So our goal is to hear every single thing that we can, sit at neighborhood task forces, hold open houses, try to get the word out for comment via survey, attendance of meetings, everything that we can do to get a large public input, so that all happens at the front end. And they've all said exactly where they feel about their neighborhoods, their community, and where they would prefer to see their growth and what they're okay with on their growth. And then the plan has to be developed for a way that is reflective of community input, and also reflective of the fact that we do still need housing and businesses and jobs to support these people. So it has to be a twofold to the process. And that public input happens at the front end. And then the plan is going to be reflective of a lot of that public input and a lot of those impacts on those environments and the streets and your local services, and come up with a guide for it. Once that's done and the plan is adopted, which there will be much participation because it will go in front of a planning commission, and it'll be presented to the public multiple times, and then it'll go in front of city council and presented to the public multiple times. Once that plan has been adopted, yes, your public participation on every single subdivision will not happen, because if that subdivision is in compliance with what is reflected in that plan, it has already been considered by the public. And then if it's over, and there will be cases where sometimes there are going to be more impacts from a development, at that point we would have more public hearings specific to that project. So it's not to eliminate everything that they can do, it's just to front load the public participation by having this plan, having something that the community can know, well, in these discussions and in this document it says it's going to be this, this, and this, and we've been through this process and we've voiced everything that we can, and that's why it's going to be very heavy public involvement. If it's outside of that, you'll be commenting on it again, we'll be notifying again, we'll be having hearings again, and evaluating for those concerns and those impacts as well.
Now, can you explain this to me? And again, my understanding may be incorrect on this, but for the housing portion of this legislation, zoning right now that allows for single-family units has been changed to allow for multifamily units?
So there's a couple of different pieces of legislation. So what you and I just talked about, the Montana Land Use Plan, that is Senate Bill 382. That's separate. The recent legislation, such as Senate Bill 245, it allows for mixed-use development and multi-unit development in commercial zones. So
in commercial zones.
And we've actually updated our zoning regulations to reflect that. So that would be like your community mixed use, your central business district, those type of more commercial centered zones can now have a mixed use building where they have offices on the bottom floor and they have residential units up top, or they can have an apartment building. It complies with the legislation and zoning, but those are allowable. And that intent was, if it's going to be in a commercial area in the city, you've got proximity to infrastructure, and it's a great way to get additional housing into the market and community and commercial zones. There's additionally been some legislation associated with accessory dwelling units. It cannot conflict.
I can never remember that. Accessory dwelling units. We're talking about a tiny house in somebody's backyard?
Yeah, like a mother-in-law suite. So this would be something that is allowable in single-family residential zoning, and it can't conflict with your covenants. So if your subdivision covenants say that there is no allowance of this, it can't conflict with that. Now, we as the planning division do not check your covenant, so that is your own due diligence.
That's right. Okay.
But we are allowing, or state law now allows for and requires for accessory dwelling units in single family homes. There are sizing restrictions within the state law as well, so it can't be more than 75% of your home floor building plan. And then it also, or if that is higher, it's 1,000 square feet, so it's whichever one. So there's that aspect of trying to get additional housing that is on the market. So that's another one that has passed recently.
So where would you find your subdivision covenants?
Typically when you close on a house, you get your title report, and there should be a copy of your covenants within that title report. You might need to read the title report and check to see, like, you know, the line items are typically numbered and it says document number this or that, and that's how you can find the document number that it is and review those covenants. If you are not sure and don't, let's say you toss the papers and or they got lost, you can always go to the clerk and recorder's office. And they can pull any covenants that exists for your
can you explain the covenants? Who originally determines what they are? Is that a function of your office?
No, no, we do not determine covenants. That would be a function of the developer, if they exist at all. So if a developer would like to, he or she, they can put covenants on a subdivision, and it can have, I've seen them have restrictions on what type of paint you can use on the exterior of your house. I've seen them restrict whether or not you can have RVs or boats in your driveway. But that is typically determined by the developer. If you do not have covenants for your subdivision, you could form some, but you'd have to go through a process of getting, you know, your neighborhood on board with that as well. But that is how they're created.
That's, I was wondering about if a neighborhood didn't have any, maybe now's a good time to get some.
Yeah, if that's what they're interested in doing, they can certainly navigate that process. You'd have to hire an attorney and then make sure that you get them recorded. You can't really record covenants on all the properties without having at least a majority of the owners involved in it. That's typically what I've seen. I would encourage you to talk to a land use attorney, because he will know the specifics, and I am not an attorney of going through that process. But I've heard of cases where that has been done after a subdivision has been recorded.
Well, I'm wondering too now, with infill housing, with more residential units, is there going to be an impact on the infrastructure, roads, sewers?
There's always going to be an impact on roads from having more cars driven on it. I think you'd be naive to think that wouldn't be the case. The intent of this Montana land use plan is to consider those impacts on the roads, the sewers, the water, to consider natural environmental features such as, like, we're not going to allow, and I don't know if this will be in the plan, but I would assume that it will. We're not going to allow you to build on a 90% incline of a cliff of the rims, right? You know, and so it's supposed to reflect these items that need to be evaluated for those criteria. And the intent of it is to distribute the cost proportionately in an equitable way between those future businesses and the homes and the residents. And that's part of the subdivision process, is they are responsible for their water and sewer and improving the roads to the standard that's associated with it. We are working on a community impact report and development report that should also feed into the land use plan. And so what that is the cost of the cost of services report is really what it's called, but that should feed into the cost and the development that associated with it. And that means for the city to provide services to this area, it's going to cost this much money. And it's also going to be reflected in that plan, because it specifically outlines in that legislation that there will be times where it is going to be further than what we can logically extend that city services too, and that should be reflective of that if that exists.
Okay.
So it should be captured within that, and it should be reflected.
So earlier you mentioned that residential properties can now be built in commercial zones. Is the opposite true? Can commercial development now occur in residential areas?
Not at this time.
Not yet, okay.
No, not at this time. In fact, I have not heard any whispers about that. So I'm not sure if you're aware about the governor's housing task force.
Mm-hmm.
I did a cursory review of the document. I didn't see any recommendations of commercial and residential zones within that document, but you never know what the state legislature will come up with. But at this
True.
point, we do still have specific residential zonings.
Now, there have been certain homeowners or citizens who came up against some of these regulations and formed a group. And it's called MADE? What does that stand for?
It's Montanans against irresponsible densification, I believe. Don't hold me to
Okay.
that specifically, but it's essentially a group of people from across the state that have taken issue with several of these recent legislative bills that have happened. So that would be the bill about allowance of residential within commercial zones, or that Montana Land Use Act 382, or the recent one that formerly had an injunction on it but has now allowed accessory dwelling units in single family residences. They are still going through that process of that the court case. There has not been a determination at this point, but it is a group that is actively in a court right now.
Right.
And it includes parties from across the state. So Missoula, Bozeman, Billings, et cetera, are all included in that.
Okay.
So it would, depending on the turnout of that, it would affect the community and the way that legislation goes.
Okay. Do you know if they have anything online where people can get more information about? It's MAID.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yes, there is. You can, I don't know if they have a website themselves, but I do know if you type in MADE lawsuit, Montana, it's going to pull up the court case documents, and you can read over them yourself. It's a very fun read. I'd recommend it at nighttime if you're not super invested in it, but it's there and it's available to the public.
Well, in your opinion, are these changes for the better?
I think that we have a need for housing, and I think
we
we've
do.
got high housing prices that are going on right now. And I think what we're trying to see from the legislature and from various communities, even our planning division, we're trying to figure out the best way that we can go through this process, be considerate of the community and the impacts that development have, but also create more units for the affordability. And I'm not going to say it's going to be, a low-income housing, because the state legislature didn't require that. Did not require that. But, the more you get on a market, typically the price goes down, because that's basic economy.
Sure.
But it is a concern, and it is something we're trying to navigate. And I think, what this Montana Land Use Planning Act does is it really does involve a lot of public participation. Like, we will be coming, and you might see me sitting in front of an Albertsons trying to get your attention to talk to you about what you want to see in your neighborhood. You might see me at your neighborhood task force talking to you, like trying to talk about, what do you guys like? What do you dislike? What do you envision? I mean, we want to hear that, and it's going to be very heavy on that. And we want to hear from you about these. And with those plans that are going on right now, the West End and the Heights, they feed into that document at some point. Please participate in them.
Okay.
Please voice your concerns. Please, we don't like this here, but we like it here. Like, please give us that information, because the more that we hear, the better that plan will be reflective of the community. And in the long run, it does cut down those timelines of review of those subdivisions and those zonings as well, which should help with getting more houses on the market quicker, because as we all know, Montana has very short construction seasons.
Oh boy.
And so if we can speed up the permitting process associated with that, I mean, you're obviously still going to have your building permits, et cetera, but if we can speed up what we can, it does help facilitate that.
Okay. So am I hearing that you're open to invitations to attend task force meetings, neighborhood task force?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Please consider me. Well, we do not have, right now actually, today is a very exciting day for me. We have sent a request for proposal out to the public, and it's been out for several weeks now, but it's, hey, who is going to help us as a consultant navigate this process of updating this plan? And their responses are due by the end of the day today.
Okay.
And we'll start evaluating that and going through that and trying to pick someone. So you should see that process start to happen
Good.
at the early part of next year.
Okay.
The deadline that the state legislature gave us to get to that final plan is May of 2026.
Okay.
So it's going to be an intensive year.
Right.
We're going to have a lot of reach out, and I'm happy to come or have one of the team members that we've got, because we've got a great team in the planning department, come and attend a meeting and talk about it. It's what we want to do. It's what we are here to advocate for our community and help our community.
Very good. And I want to thank you for being here. It's very informative. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm always happy to help as much as I can, because I really care about our community here.
We will have you back.
Good.
Thanks again. And thank you for joining us on Your City. We'll see you next time.